Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here, and congratulations. My name is Beatrice, and I'm with my colleague Beatrice as well. And we'll be happy to answer if you have any questions.
That was fast. Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you very much for being here. It's not every time that people kind of take the time to come to the physical part of this training. So my name is Alex. I believe I've talked with some of you guys on Skype, with others I haven't met before. So those of you that are new, welcome. Congratulations again, and pleasure being here. So I'm one of the pitch trainers. I'll also normally run one or several stages during the conference, and I've been doing this for the last 5 to 6 years. So I know the whole evolution of what kind of startups, how do they pitch, how people react, and stuff like that. So the idea for this class is to cover some of the basics of what is startup pitch, or what kind of are we looking for during the pitch on stage. This is designed for a 4 to 5 minute pitch, which means that for a 3-minute pitch, you obviously need to ditch stuff, okay? But that being said, it's always worthwhile, always worthwhile to see the whole stack. What are the typical questions that we should answer when we are on a stage? Let it be on the stage or let it be somewhere else, basically, okay? So please, at any point, do stop me if you have any questions, any doubts, anything. The goal of this class or this workshop is to get as much as possible, so no problem on stopping at any point and answering any questions, okay? Good, so far? Any questions before we start? No? All clear? Okay. Everyone's going to win, right?
Yes.
Yes? Oh. Are you sure? Just here.
One basic question.
Yep.
The pitch is in English.
The pitch is in English.
Okay.
That's right. We do have one case where they don't speak English, which is pretty weird and pretty rare. But yes, officially it's in English, which means actually that the judges are going to be, in most cases, international, which means that if you don't pitch in English, they won't understand you. And you won't get grading, basically. Good? Questions? No? Okay. Just to give you a brief background of who I am. I'm what I call a failed serial entrepreneur. Okay, I keep starting companies, and you know, clearly I'm not in an island right now, and I'm not having, you know, party in a boat in Monaco or something like that. So clearly I'm not that successful. No, that's not true. But once you start a company and you do another one and you do another one, this just becomes like something really cool, and it's in a way a lifestyle. So I started several companies. One of them, for example, is Tetuan Valley, which is still active. It was one of the first startup pre-acceleration programs in, I would say, in the world. Definitely the first one in Europe at the time. I was part of the team at Akuri Ventures, where we did a venture capital investment on several projects. I was one of the founding members of Startup Bootcamp Europe. Good afternoon, guys. Please take a seat. And then I got fed up with startups and I said, I'm done. So I kind of took some time off, and I came back and I started Press42, which is my own company, and where we specialize on storytelling for companies. So we started trying to do a product, we failed, and the backdrop of that was that we became experts on storytelling. Hello.
Hello.
Oh wow, right from the airport. Afternoon. And so we work basically with all kind of companies, let it be startups all the way to Fortune 500 companies. I was one of the, I have that part, which is the telling stories part, and then I have the other part, which is the editor part. So I used to be an editor at a publication out of London that was called The Kernel. Anyone here, if I mention, hello, go for it. If I mention Milo Yiannopoulos, anyone rings any bell? For some people? He was my boss there. So, yeah. I don't know if I should say lucky me or, you know, I can tell a bunch of stories about that. Anyway, but The Kernel was actually a pretty successful publication, and a lot of the editors, when the things went down the drain, thanks to Milo, obviously, Some of us got together and we co-founded Tech.eu. So I'm one of the co-founders at Tech.eu, which is probably one of the biggest tech publications in Europe right now. And following up with my editorial background, last year I started like a new editorial venture that's called thealeph.com, where I kind of write a little bit more on strategy thinking around innovation and around technology. So, okay, this is the things that are happening right now in technology. What are the ramifications? What are the implications of this stuff from a business side? Like, should you be investing on this stuff? Should you be ignoring this? So I touch many things, including obviously AI, things like, Vamos. Oh, so I make people thirsty, right?
Yes, that's right.
Thank you, Gemma. And I'm also an IE professor, as you can see. So anyway, and at the Aleph, basically, I touched many different topics, including things like blockchain. Should you ignore blockchain? Should you take care of blockchain? And stuff like that. Some of them are obvious, some of them are not that obvious, right? So I kind of go on both sides, both on the editorial side and writing stuff, and on the helping other people communicate better, okay? So that's kind of a little bit of my background. I see an average of roughly around 2,000 to 3,000 projects every year. Every year. I probably see more projects than a lot of VCs, actually. Most of the VCs call me and say, hey, do you know any project that's pretty cool in this and that space? So, oh wow, this keeps giving. And so I just bring this up because it's very typical that I remember certain projects, but I don't remember who I talked to, and it's hard for me to recommend them. I might remember like, yeah, there was one I talked with not long ago. And I'm bringing this up because part of your job is not that much to win the competition, which obviously is nice, but actually to make sure that people remember you, because that's what's going to open a lot of the doors, basically. So, speaking of which, I'm a little bit against thinking about pitching as something that you do exclusively on a stage. Okay, pitching is an essential part of doing a startup, because it's basically the moment where you're conveying what exactly are you doing. And if you've been in the startup world as I've been for the last 15 years, and you talk with a new startup, it literally takes me roughly between 30 seconds to a minute to understand if they know their shit or not. It's that fast. You see it immediately. The way they explain their startup, the way they explain who's going to use that, the way they explain the problem, it's just immediate. It's like, you need to do more research, or you don't fully control the market you're trying to enter, okay? I'm saying this because you need to understand that despite us doing an exercise on the stage of presenting this, it's an integral part of doing startups. It's an integral part of making sure people, catch what you're doing and see the full potential of what you're doing. Actually, for me, this is very interesting because through the Aleph, that's what I try to write about. That's what I try to tell people. Is like, look, I'll give you an example that we were talking recently at the office, which is the WeWork example. Every time you bring WeWork, everyone knows WeWork? Yes? Anyone doesn't know WeWork? Don't be shy. Don't be shy. You just leave the door, leave the building, and that's fine. I'm just joking. So WeWork, every time you bring WeWork, everyone goes like, oh, yeah, that's a real estate company. It's a co-working space thing. And it's not. And if you judge WeWork as a real estate company, you will fail to see the potential that WeWork, or the kind of disruption that WeWork is creating in the space, in many spaces, actually. So my point is, that is, in a way, your job as startups is to highlight the ramifications of what you're doing and why you're doing it, right? So the stage is just an excuse to do that. An excuse which is one of the moments where you do it, but not the only one. Now, going back to the stage, there are many peculiarities when you go on a stage, but there's also a lot of common experiences with the stage, okay? This is a demo day from Techstars. This is a demo day from 500 Startups. This is a demo day from Startup Chile. And in most of them, they all kind of share something similar, which is after the 10th pitch, people start bringing their phones out. Okay? Normally starts around the 5th pitch. It's like, yeah, seen it before, boring. Let's check Instagram puppy pictures, right? And you bring the phone. But that's, I mean, that's okay. Maybe you have an important email you want to answer, and yeah, let's check. Update, no new emails, okay, maybe it's that. The worst thing is not that, the worst thing is when someone starts napping, okay, and this shit actually happens, especially if people are very bad and very naughty and they put you on a slot which is at 3 p.m., okay, 3 p.m. in Spain, you probably will find a couple of people napping during your pitch. Now the worst thing is not when they nap, the worst thing is when the guy next to them start napping, then you know you have a problem, okay. So I want to highlight this stuff because in many cases, the reason why people disconnect is because you do a bad job on the stage. It's not because your startup is bad, it's because the way you explain it, the design that you're using on the slide decks, all that stuff matters. One of the pitches I was training with for one of you guys, we were reviewing the pitch and the pitch was fantastic, the narrative was fantastic, the slides sucked balls. The design was really bad. And I said, like, look, you're doing an amazing job with this, but everything counts when you only have 3 minutes and you're going against 99 other startups, which means that upping the design game, making sure the slides are readable, making sure the designs are visual, it's important. Okay, so take care about these things. Now, overall, we're going to follow what's called the 10-20-30 Kawasaki rule with some changes based on experience. This is designed for a 3 to 6 minute pitch. The idea is to cover all the questions, the most important questions that someone might have when they meet you for the first time, when you go on stage for the first time, okay? So it's not necessarily all you have to touch on a 3-minute pitch. Again, you won't have the time. You need to choose what you want to highlight and why. Okay, the important thing is why. This is a framework. And let me highlight the word framework, which means that you can change it. This is just a starting point. And what I'm going to try to explain during this hour and a half that we have is why these things are there and when can you actually change them, ignore them, permutate them, move them around, okay? There's a reason behind these questions and it's not random at all. Now this is the format we're going to use. Some of you are actually, I believe you're pretty used to some parts of this. And it's, as I said a moment ago, it's not random. These questions are not random. And I introduce here a new concept, which is questions. This structure responds to a question and answer structure. So the moment you hop on the stage, the first thing that people are going to ask themselves is, who the fuck is this guy and what are they doing? Or gal. Okay? That is the first question that anyone is going to have. In my case, when I wear a hat, the first question is, who is this crazy guy and why is he wearing a hat? And then the next question is, okay, what is he going to talk about? Okay, but the hat questions happens most of the times. My point is, there is a question-answer sequence here. Depending on how you answer that first question, it might be relevant to talk about the solution or it might be relevant to talk about something else. Okay, we're going to see permutations of this flow later on, okay? But keep this in mind. This is a conversation between you and the audience. And it keeps going back and forth, even though you don't see it, but it's actually going back and forth, okay? Now we're going to go through each one of them one by one. Obviously, number one thing, as I said, is who are you and what are you going to talk about? But there's a big problem with that way of phrasing it. A lot of people tend to explain this part of their pitch the other way around, explaining something that's not exactly what's being asked here. Let me actually also highlight the fact that problem solution accounts for roughly around 80% of the weight of the pitch. Let me repeat that, like around 80% of the power of your pitch is going to be compounded between these 2 points, problem and solution. If I don't understand why you're doing it, If I don't understand the ramifications of why you're doing what you're doing, then it doesn't matter. The rest doesn't matter. Well, doesn't matter, except if you drop something like, and we're making 10 million in revenue every month. Okay, whatever you're doing, keep doing it, okay? You know, these things happen, but it's not the usual. Okay, so the reason why a lot of people get this wrong is the way we conceptualize this. So normally when someone asks you the first time they meet you, it's like, oh, so Alex, what do you do? The way we phrase it is, what do we do? And that's what we tend to answer. Oh, well, my company does X, Y, Z, blah, blah, blah. But that's not really the question they're asking. The question they're really asking is, what do you do and why should I care? And that part of why should I care has the most weight in that equation. It's not, if I don't care about it, I don't care what you do. I really don't. Okay? And that's very usual for VCs, very usual for investors, it's very usual for partners. Okay, why are you telling me this stuff? Why should I care about that? Why should anyone actually care about these things? Okay? I'll give you an example of this, real example. These are real screenshots. This was an old screenshot from Microsoft Surface. Blah, 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 USB, blah, 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 micro SD, blah, 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 HD AV. What question do you think Microsoft is answering about the product here? Anyone?
Get power in a small package. They're trying to overcome, they're trying to make it look like a computer when it looks like a tablet.
But what are they describing here? What question are they answering for the customer? Anyone?
It's a computer.
And what is that question? The what?
Yeah.
What's in it for me?
What is it? It's a computer. And it has this part, and it does this, and blah, blah, blah. This is for bonus points. Body of a tablet, heart of a laptop. Who wrote that? Hmm? Who wrote this?
An engineer.
Come on. Body of a tablet, heart of a laptop? What department can only write that? Marketing, right? Okay, that was marketing. Who wrote save $100 on a Surface Pro when you buy now? Sales, okay? And who wrote the paragraph there? Engineers. Do not let engineers do the copywriting. It's a very bad idea. And I say that because I'm an engineer. Very bad idea, okay? Never, ever let the engineers write this stuff. Now, most people think this is cool. And it's mostly the engineers that think it's cool. It's not, okay? This is not what people respond to, okay? Same product, different company. Now we go with Apple. This is a screenshot of an old web page for the iPad. Watch how apps enrich lives. The iPad is transforming the way teachers teach and students learn. The iPad and the apps made for it changed the way you work. 3, 2, 1, what question are they answering here? The why, the what's in it for me. They don't even touch on the technology. They don't even touch about what the iPad is. It's like, look, you know what? You're going to be a better person with this. I don't know if you remember I still remember the days when the iPhone came out. And you would go for a coffee with someone, and the first thing they would do would go like, and you go like, oh, you have an iPhone. Oh, you noticed. Like, yes, I did. You literally threw the phone on me. You know, because it's, in a way, Apple as a brand is a lifestyle brand. They give you a lot more than just technology. Actually, they give, for them, what they bring to the table, except on the announcement of yesterday, today, was pretty bad. But normally, what they bring to the table is much more than technology, and for them, it's way more important the way of life around the brand than the actual technology. They respond the basic question of why should I care? Why should I own this? Why should I pay you for this? Okay. Now, there's a very good talk from Simon Sinek. It's a TED talk that's called How Great Leaders Inspire. And he talks about a theory that's called the Golden Circle. Highly advisable to check out the talk, very, very quick talk. But what Sinek actually covers is exactly what we saw. Most engineering companies, most technical companies, they always start explaining what they do through the first question, which is the what. If they are very, very nerdy, very, very geek, they'll go on and explain to you how they do it. And very rarely they touch on why they do what they do. When you start explaining something with what we do and then you go fully fledged on look, we have a certain number of nanotransmitters that connect with the nanotubes that we're building in a saline solution that has some proto-soup proteins. This is the face people get. Like, what did you just say? Okay. It is a myth that investors and the general audience knows their shit. It is a big myth. Most investors don't know shit. They are, don't get me wrong, if there's any bankers or people that work in financial institutions, it's not about you. But in most cases, these are people that have been working in financial institutions. And hey, about numbers and finance, they know a lot. About biotech, about clean tech, about this stuff, they don't know that much. Which means that a lot of the concepts that you sometimes take for granted shouldn't be taken for granted because the audience doesn't understand them. Okay? Now, good companies actually always explain why they do it. If I do a great job at why we're doing what we're doing, then I don't need to explain the rest. It's like, look, our product saves lives. You don't care how you do it. I just, okay, I'm sold. Okay, I'm sold. I don't need to understand anything else. Okay? Now, this kind of connects with what I was saying before. Based on my experience in the past few years, one of the things that I've seen is that when you guys start talking about the problem, you barely scratch the surface of what the real problem really is. So you say something like, yeah, we're doing this because there's this pain point and people have this issue. And then when you stop and you go like, yeah, but do people really have that issue? Is that the real problem? Well, no. There's these other things that are happening. It's like, yeah, but you don't fully understand what the problem really is. Okay? And I bring this up because it happens a lot. There's a technique, those of you that know a little bit of lean or agile or lean manufacturing probably have heard about this. It's called the root cause analysis technique, also known as the 5 whys. Now, my advice is when you're explaining the problem, the pain that you're solving in your product or service, ask yourself 5 times, why? So first time is, okay, I'll give you a real example from, I think it was a year and a half, 2 years ago, also South Summit, very nice company. And essentially, they were building a product that allowed you to track your performance when you were training in the gym. And when I asked him, okay, but why are you doing this? Why is this important? He's like, no, because it allows you to track the performance. I was like, yeah, but why is that a problem? He's like, well, because normally you don't have the phone with you. And I'm like, okay, but why is that a problem? And he said like, well, because then you don't go to the gym and you drop out. And I was like, really? And I was like, how does that connect? Why is that an issue? So like, well, what we've discovered with the research is that when you do the same exercise all the time and you don't see any progress or you cannot track the progress, eventually you keep doing the same stuff and you get bored of training on the same things. And the more bored you are, the more probable it is that you actually drop out when there's a small break. So if we can fix the issue of being able to track what you're doing, and not only track what you're doing and your progress, but actually send that to someone that's a personal trainer that can actually tell you, hey, you know, you've done enough of that. Let's change the exercise. Then you can retain, you have a higher level of engagement and retaining and retention within the gym. It took me 4 questions to get to the core of what the problem really was. You see what I mean? It's like, it's okay. I mean, for a generalistic audience, it's okay if you say like, oh, we're doing something that helps you track your progress on the gym. Okay, everyone understands that? But it's very different than saying, look, you know, we're building something that allows gyms to increase the retention of their customers. And it allows you to grow in your own trainings. Okay, that's a completely different stuff. You see? So careful with this. Ask yourself the 5 whys. Go deeper into fully understanding what kind of forces create that issue. The more you understand those forces, the more it's going to come through on the pitch. This is what I was referring to before. It's very easy for someone that knows the space to identify someone that's talking about this without fully understanding what the problem really is. I cannot count the number of times I've stopped a startup and said, like, you're not understanding the problem. And they go like, yeah, we have a full understanding of the problem. It's like, no, because that's not the problem. The problem is here. And they go like, oh. I'm like, that cannot happen on your pitch. It cannot be that someone that knows very well this space can actually tell you, no, you're wrong. You're looking in the wrong direction. That's not the issue. The issue comes all the way back here. If you fix this, it cascades all the way there and fixes the issue. Okay? For those of you that like this kind of thing, system thinking. It's all about systems thinking, about understanding that there's many forces that affect something, and it's not on the first iteration, but actually way upstream that the situation or the problem normally happens. What you normally see as the, let's say, outcrop of a problem is really just the last consequence of a sequence, but it's not the actual root of the problem, okay? Those companies, those startups, those projects that really attack the root of the problem are the ones that make the most money. Now, if that is clear, well, before I say that, I don't know if we have a pen. There we go. Which whiteboard is better for you guys? This one or that one? Okay. No one decides, so I'll use this one. Some of you have this issue, and you need to take it into account because it's a recurrent situation when we're trying to explain where the pain is, or who the pain, or why it's important for a certain segment of people. Some of you are highly specialized, which means that your target audience as a customer is pretty tiny. Okay, this is your target customer. Now, what you're going to have at South Summit, and in general in most conferences, is a much wider onset of people. People that might not be, or in most cases won't be, your target customers. This is a specialized audience, and this is a generalistic audience. Now, in this case, you're going to have a generalistic audience. You might have people in the room that are experts and that can relate very closely to what you're saying, but you have to design your pitch for the general audience instead of your specialized audience. I always answer this question because I always have starters that go like, yeah, but I don't give a crap about the generalistic audience. My target customers are this, and these are the only people I want to talk to. Wrong. Wrong. Because 90-something% of the conversations you're going to have are going to be with generalistic audience. And one of the things that most people that take that approach don't see is that even though it's a generalistic audience, these people are highly connected. The people you're going to meet at South Summit have extensive and vast social networks, which means that even though I might not be your target customer, I probably know who is your target customer. And wonder of wonders, he's a friend of mine. We went to school together, or we went to the MBA together, or whatever together, okay? Now, if you convince me that this is a great idea, I'll go like, you know what? I need to introduce you to my friend. My friend is the GE or the GM of whatever, or the CEO of this company. You need to talk to him. That, let's say, insights by proxy happen most of the times. That's how most of the times you get customers. Okay, so keep that in mind when you're designing things. Now, the challenge here is if you are pitching for this audience, how do you connect to the generalistic audience? And I'll give you an example of this that happened some years ago. We had I was working with a wire company in the UK, and they were doing an interesting software for shift management. Has anyone here worked on a company that used shifts to do their work? Shifts, like the morning shift, the afternoon shift, the night shift. Anyone? Yeah, raise your hand. Okay, wow. How was the experience? Was it good, bad, normal? Huh?
It was fine.
Was fine?
It's complex.
I love the euphemism. It's complex.
Very difficult.
Huh?
It's very difficult.
It's difficult. So this was the issue that they were having. They were pitching their company as a solution to complex situation with shifts in a company. And anyone who has worked on a shift-based company, they know that it can be complex, difficult. You were lucky. Okay. Most people, and excuse my language, most people get fucked when you deal with shifts. Eventually you get the bad shift, or they change it when they shouldn't change it, or you pull a double shift. It happens. Now, these guys were saying, hey, look, we're fixing this. We have a software as a service that fixes this. Problem they were having is every time they pitched this, as I did, today I'm surprised, today we have a lot of people that have experienced this compared to the usual answer. The usual answer in a room like this is one person. And obviously they were pitching this to big audiences and it wasn't connecting. And they were telling me, look, every time we pitch this, it just doesn't connect. People don't care about our software. And we're doing really well. I mean, we're implementing this on these companies and this and this and this. And I would say, like, of course, because you're pitching to the wrong audience. And he said, yeah, but that's our customer. It's like, I know, that is your customer. But you cannot pitch to your customer because your customer tends to be a minority within a general audience. Now, but he said, well, then how do we pitch this? And I said, well, the best way to approach this problem is by pitching the consequences of failing at doing this. Now, what if I told you that the next time I'm going to try to replicate a situation that I think everyone here has experienced somehow, either on a restaurant, a hotel, or a cafe. So imagine that you go to the nearest Starbucks or Nero or Costa Cafe or whatever, and you go there every morning, okay? So you go there in the morning, and for whatever reason, that morning you come through the door and the guy starts screaming at you. It's like, oh, come on, you've taken too long. What do you want? Whoa, I know it's, Monday, but what's wrong with you? Come on, I need to blah, blah. So the guy starts like misbehaving. Tip of a pro, first thing you need to do when you get the coffee or the tea, make sure there's no spit in it. Okay? Just pro tip. But this has happened to you probably in a restaurant too, okay? Or it has happened at a hotel. We've all experienced this. Now, what you don't know is that that person is pissed because they should be in Cuba at that time. The reason why they're not in Cuba on their vacation is because someone fucked the shifts. So there are consequences to this stuff, consequences that affect the general audience. Now, the example I gave you, it's an okay example. It kind of drives the point that, hey, you are exposed to industries that run with shifts more often than you think. But what if I told you that the next time you go to the emergency room, the doctor that is taking care of your kid, your partner, your friend, your family, your mom, your dad, or yourself has been pulling a 48-hour shift there because someone fucked the system. Now it's not that funny, right? Now we're talking about risking lives because this is not working as it should. Second pro tip, and we're going to see later, if you're going to tell the story of illustrating the problem that you're having or the problem that people might have because of this, try to kill someone. And if you can kill a baby, even better, okay? No, honestly, a lot of the stuff you guys do has life-threatening ramifications. It's not always, but in some cases you can push it to the point where you say, like, look, people die if they don't have this stuff, okay? Use it. Use it to your advantage. The more conflictive the story is, the more powerful the attraction to or the reasoning on why this matters is going to be. Okay? Good? Now, if this is clear, the next thing we need to explain, what do you think is going to be? Okay, you got me with, okay, we're building something that's going to fix the shifts at the emergency room of a hospital. Okay? You got me there. Now, what do you think is going to be the next question I'm going to ask myself?
Why you?
Why you? That could be a very good question. That's one. What else could I ask myself?
How are you going to solve it?
How are you going to solve it? Two questions. Both of them extremely plausible. One of them is more plausible than others depending on your industry. So now here we come with variations of the flow that are going to depend on the industry you're working on. So for example, if your industry is very well known and there's a lot of competition, the first question that's going to come is why you? You know, there's been gazillion other people trying to fix this. Why do you think you're capable of fixing this? Which means we're now talking about the team, we're now talking about the competition, and we're now talking about the differential value of a company. What on the scheme before, it's called competition, number 4, and technology, number 5. And we're talking about it very early on. Why? Because the industry demands that. Because every time you pitch this, someone asks you this question. If someone asks you this question, means that you have to answer it earlier. So this is the game of question and answering that I was talking about. If you've pitched before your company, you need to listen very closely how people react and what kind of questions they're asking you. It cannot happen that every time you pitch something, you get the same question. If you get the same question, you're doing it wrong, because that means that you're not answering the question during the pitch. Okay? Now, this is a situation where if everyone keeps asking you, okay, but who are you to think you're going to fix this, then it probably means that you need to explain some kind of rapport before you even talk about anything else. It's like, look, you know why I know this? Because I've been director for one of the top hospitals in Spain for the past 15 years. And I've been in charge of the ER for the last 5. That's who I am, and that's why I know this is a problem. From that point onward, everything else I tell you, it's kind of validated or giving a little bit more weight by the fact that I have experience on that stuff. You see? We'll go into depth later. Now, the other path that we can take is, okay, smartass, how are you going to solve this? Solution. What are you doing? This is the what. First, we've talked about the why. Now we're talking about what do we do. Now, the what, explaining the what we do, it's a delicate balance between, on one side you have people that explain what they do in an extremely abstract way. It's like, oh, we're doing the next generation social mobile music app. Yeah, that's a face. This is a real pitch, I shit you not, okay? And then you go like blink, blink, blink. What again? Yeah, next generation big data app. Blink, blink, blink. I still don't understand what you're doing. Okay, so be very careful with using any kind of word that it's trendy, but it's lacking any kind of specific definition. Typical case, and I have this company, it's one of my customers, or was one of my customers. We are an IoT security company. Do you have any idea what they do? Apart from IoT and security. And when I ask you define IoT, anyone wants to take a swing at it?
Internet of Things.
Huh?
Internet of Things.
Yeah, okay, and what are Internet of Things? Hey, you answer me.
Or whatever.
What kind of devices?
Like TV and.
Okay, so this doesn't work for my industry, I have a factory.
I'm way too deep for my knowledge.
Exactly, but this is my point. My point is, even though everyone here has heard about IoT, if I start digging on the exact definition of what you mean by that, you won't be able to answer. So there are many interpretations available, which turns your what do we do into something that's not tangible. It's not something I can work with as an audience. Okay? Now, this doesn't mean that you have to go to the other side. The other side is like, we're doing a deep neural network based on combinational neural networks with a short-term, long-term memory scheme. And you go like, what the hell is he talking about, okay? It's not that either. It's something in between. In a way, you have to explain what you're doing. The benchmark that I normally say is like, you should be able to explain this to a 4-year-old. If a 4-year-old doesn't understand you, it's either too abstract or too complex, okay? Also, try to do the experiment of pitching a woman about this. And I'm going to explain why. Women have two things, okay? We guys, this is for you guys. We go out for some beers with the friends, and then you come back home and you go like, oh my God, I had the best idea ever. And your partner goes like, looks at you and goes like, uh-huh. How many beers have you had? Doesn't matter. This is the best next thing. We're going to do an Instagram for toenails. That's when your partner looks at you, goes like this, like, no, you're not going to do that. Okay, it's going to be huge. She goes like, no, it's not. Okay? And the reason is, men in general, we get excited with stupid things very easily. Okay? And that's a fact. And women have two things to their advantage. One of them is one of the most important one, is they're very realistic about stuff, and second of all is they're extremely empathetic, much more than men are in general. Which means that they're capable of putting themselves on the side of the market. So if a woman tells you she doesn't see this, trust her, because most probably there is no market. Okay? So it's a good exchange if you do this, for example, to a woman from a different generation or from a different industry. So for example, pitch your mom this stuff, or pitch your grandma. Someone that has nothing to do, different generation, and if she doesn't get it, you're not doing it right. Okay? And if she says like, no one is going to buy this, believe her. Okay? In general, they're pretty much spot on here. Now, words, that's one side. On the other side, as I said, is don't use complex words, acronyms from your industry. This is very typical on specific verticals, like, for example, the ad tech space. I was once working with an ad tech company, and in like literally 30 seconds, the founder said like, yeah, because our BTR and our DMP and our RTV, and then we can use some retargeting to blah, blah, blah. And I was like, what did you just say? And then he started explaining all this stuff and said like, huh, why didn't you say like that? This is like if you ask a lawyer, okay? Then he will go ranting for like 15 minutes, and then you go like, okay, basically you said that what I want to do is legal. Yes. Why didn't you say that? Okay, well, it's exactly the same. Now, these words are important to keep them on the slides if there's going to be a specific audience. So if you know that there's going to be a couple of experts on the room, keep it on your slides. But do not use it as a way to explain what you do. So for example, if I'm talking about retargeting, I can keep the retargeting word up there, but the way I'm going to explain this is not by using the word retargeting. Now, some people can tell you, oh, wow, but it was pretty obvious. That's the best compliment someone can tell you about a pitch. It was pretty obvious? Check. Good. That means that anyone can understand that. Now, obviously, the expert is going to go like, yeah, but that was pretty clear. It's like, yeah, it's pretty clear for you, but not for a lot of other people, okay? If you don't remember this, do remember that every time you use one of these acronyms, God kills a kitten, okay? So either way, keep track of that. Now, the best way to explain the problem-solution pair is through storytelling. Tell a good story highlighting the problem. Tell a good story on how the protagonist of the story solves it. Okay, hello, my name is Luke, and I save the universe, okay? For those of you a little younger, hello, I'm Harry Potter, and I save humanity from the one that cannot be named. This is a generational problem. Sometimes I say, Luke, use the Force, and people go like, what are you talking about? Like, okay, I'm feeling old. But use stories to highlight this stuff. Now, do not invent the story. If you invent the story, they will catch you. We have roughly around 10,000 years of storytelling experience as a human race. They will catch you if you invent a story, okay? So do not invent it. You can, you know, add bells and whistles. You can compound different stories that happen to different people. You know, there's several resources that you can use to compact the story, but do not invent it. You will be caught, okay? Now, storytelling doesn't happen like that. Like, oh yeah, I have a good story and I'm just gonna go and tell a story. It takes time. And more than time, it takes training and practice. I tell the story and then people go like, nah, I don't care about that story. But that thing you said about the story was actually pretty cool. And then you go like, so a story in a way is like a fractal. You guys know what a fractal is? Okay, this let's see if someone knows the exact pronunciation of this. Bunder something fractals? Anyone? I never know how to pronounce that. Well, there's a kind of fractal, which is the one that everyone knows, which is what you find in nature. For example, in a crystal. For example, in a crystal of ice, where if you zoom in, then the same structure appears again. If you keep zooming in, it keeps appearing. Or, I never know the name of this thing. There's a vegetable, which is a fractal, which is like a cone thing that goes around. It's family of the cauliflower. I have no idea what that's called, but it's absolutely mind-blowing when you go to the supermarket and you see that thing and you go like, oh my God, a fractal that you can eat. And I shit you not, it looks like unreal. You go like, this cannot be a vegetable. And it is. And it's super cool. But anyway, I'll stop with the geeky things. But the story is like a fractal, which means that you can highlight a tiny portion of the story, and if you zoom in on that story, suddenly it just becomes a whole new story. Okay? So storytelling requires that kind of practice in a way that's saying, okay, I'll tell you the story, but not all the parts of the story are powerful. So I need to focus on those that are powerful, especially taking into account that I have 3 to 5 minutes to explain this. Okay, so you have to be very clear about what part of the story you highlight, what part of the story drives the point of what you are trying to tell, okay? In a nutshell, you need to be different. This is not about technology anymore. It's gotten to a point right now where technological advancement to a certain degree has more or less plateaued on the sense that nearly every single startup that you're going to see around you right now has a similar technological stack. They might have developed something better than you, or it's a slightly different algorithm, but they're basing the solution on a similar tech stack, which means that technology is not a problem anymore as it used to be. So a lot of investors, when you talk to them, what they tell you is that, yeah, I'm not worried about them getting this right, because eventually it's a matter of throwing millions at it. A good example of this is SoftBank. Okay, I have a $100 billion fund, so I keep throwing money at solutions. Some of them are not even real, but they just keep pushing it and say like, look, I'll give you all the money in the world and you are gonna make it real. Now, the real competition right now is not on the technological front. In some cases, in some instances, in some verticals it is, but in most of them it's not. Most of it, you need to understand that the guy next to you has the same kind of technology or a very similar one. Now, what really matters is that people remember you. What really matters is that when someone is talking about, you know, an app that allows you to, you know, record podcasts, there are at least 10 of them that are high quality stuff. Why should I remember you and not the other one? That's the real challenge you're fighting for. Because, hey, you know, this guys and that guys are very similar. I don't know if you guys listen to podcasts, but you have on the iPhone, you have the Apple podcast thingy. On Android, one of the most successful one is Pocket. And then you have a new one that's called Breaker that just appeared. And then you go like, okay, which one should I choose? Why should I choose? And they're nearly exactly the same. Yeah, one is nicer, better colors, the other one blah, blah, blah. But it's nearly exactly the same. So why should I choose this one versus that one? In that case, storytelling, generating high impact on an audience is what makes a difference. And I've heard this conversation so many times during beers when someone comes around and says like, oh yeah, I know those guys are badass. You go like, yeah, but there's another Ukrainian company that's doing something similar. Oh no, but these guys are killing it. And they might even have a worse technology than the Ukrainian one. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter anymore. So keep that in mind. That part of what you're playing at is not just the technological aspect. Again, I reiterate, I'm not saying it's not important. It is important. But it's not the only thing anymore. Okay? Now, if I'm clear about the problem and I'm clear about the solution, what do you think? Okay, so this is a very painful thing that happens to people, and you have an incredible solution that I can work with. What do you think is going to be my next question? There's many potential outcomes here, okay? But what would you think? What would be your next question? Anyone?
Who's addressing the problem?
One question is, okay, if this is so painful, there's obviously has to be some people working on this. Competition. Another option.
How many people will really use it?
Or,
Who can benefit?
exactly, if we rephrase this is, okay, how many people have this pain point? Which is another words for how big is the market? But you see, what I want what I want you to see here is that this is a conversation, and depending on what I explained before, what knowledge do you have about my industry, what industry am I in, this kind of conversation will go one way or will go another way. What's important for you to understand is that you need to have the answer for these questions, and then you kind of keep moving them around depending on the conversation, okay? Now you can see this with the faces of people. You go like, okay, now they're expecting this or that or that. Or by means of doing it many times and saying, oh yeah, but the moment you said that, I was thinking about blah, blah, blah. And you go like, so if I say that and you start thinking like this, then I need to deliver that before your brain catches up, basically. The best presentations, by the way, are those that are capable of doing mind reading effects, which is, I know so well what people are going to think next after I say something on stage, that before your brain is catching up with it, I'm already delivering an answer. It's like, oh, by the way, you might be thinking, but these guys look like Spotify. But let me explain to you why we're not like Spotify. And your brain, which is it's racing to say, oh, but there is people like you, for example, you resemble Spa, and as your brain is making this question, you are already delivering the answer. So there is no time for the brain, and you go like, oh wow, they're reading my mind. The more you do the pitch, the more you will see those breaking points where people are asking themselves something and you say, oh, I should deliver this before, okay? Now market, or another way of saying how big is the pie and how do we eat the pie? Two sides of the spectrum, okay? Please. If you're in a very, very crowded space, in a very crowded and competitive market, please don't go and say like, oh, we're going to do an app for smartphones and the market is a $20 trillion market. It's like, seriously? Like, really? You're going to do yet another app? So if your industry is very crowded, if your vertical is very crowded, and there's a lot of people playing that, because obviously there's probably a problem that's worth fixing, then you better explain to me what has made you make the decision of going in that space. Okay? So if you suddenly go out of your way and saying, we're going to do another social media company, you better explain to me what kind of strategic gap you found to go against Facebook, to go against Twitter, to go against Instagram, to go against WhatsApp, to go against Tencent, to go against, okay, gazillion, multi-billion-dollar companies. No one is saying don't go there. But what we're saying is, okay, there's a lot of people here, so convince me of why there has to be yet another company in that space. What have you seen that we haven't seen? So maybe you're launching a virtual reality social network. Could be. something based on VR, something based on AR, something based on top of Oculus, whatever. Normally, strategic gaps appear on the fabric of the market when disruptive technologies come on board. So blockchain is another situation where a blockchain-powered company might come into a very crowded space and actually disrupt it. And the reason why they can go in is because they figure out a small gap that their technology allows them to cover that no one else is capable of delivering. You see what I mean? So you better explain that, okay? Now, the other end of the spectrum. Oh, we're doing a nanometric scale molecule that's gonna cure this and blah, blah, blah. And you go like, okay, how many people in the world even understand what you're talking about? 3. Well, if no one has heard about your space and you're in a very, very niche market, you need to do the opposite. You need to explain to me how scalable is that. Because I don't mind that there's only 100 clients in the whole world, as long as each client is willing to chip in 10 million per client. Then, okay, fine, go for all the 100 clients. But you better explain to me that we can sell this for $1 billion, or I'm not gonna be interested on it. You see? Most companies fall in between. Okay, I'm just putting you the polarizing extremes here, but most people will fall in between. But if you feel that you're more leaning towards one side or towards the other side, be aware. Here's the point where you can give an extra information of like, look, this is a space and this is why we're going here, okay? Good so far? Now, normally when we're talking about the market, what people want to understand is how much money is there to be made here. So sometimes it's not enough to say, look, there's 2 billion people that have this issue. Okay, fine, there's 2 billion people that have that issue. But how does that translate into a potential moneymaker, okay? Because if those 2 billion people are just gonna chip in, 1 cent, and maybe, then maybe it's not that big. Well, it is big, but maybe it's not that big, okay? Now, I'm gonna add here a comment, and this is more of a personal comment, because I'm seeing this lately and it just breaks my heart. Let me be clear about something. I've been doing startups for 15 years. The reason why I do startups is not because of the money. And a lot of my peers don't do startups because of the money. And I'm seeing a worrisome trend where I'm seeing young people pitching their companies that solve really problematic things, companies that save lives. And you know how they pitch it? When they come here, they say like, well, our company is absolutely fantastic because it's going to save the government $20 billion in life insurance. That's how they pitch the company. Instead of saying, look, our company saves lives. That's what we do. That's why we do it. You see the difference? Another thing is that eventually you talk about the market, it's like, well, this eventually has the consequences of helping insurance save money, which is our primary target, or governments or whatever. But I want to drive this point because I'm seeing way too many startups that are dehumanizing what they're doing. Keep in mind that whatever you're doing it for humans, and you're doing it for the good of the human race. Okay? It's not to make money. Money making is the consequence of fixing something for society. Please keep this in mind. Again, this comment, personal one, okay? Completely personal one. But I see way too many startups that instead they have this complete detachment from the reality of what's going on the ground. You just have to watch all the answers that Facebook gives every week. So every week there's a Facebook story of some kind of fuck up they've done. And when you read how they answer to the problem, you'll see that it's the equivalent of someone that has absolutely no kind of connection with human beings. It's like, clearly you're not talking with people that are homeless. Because if you were, you wouldn't explain this way. Okay? So keep this in mind. Please don't dehumanize whatever you're doing. Because whatever you're doing works because of a human user. Hopefully. Eventually it will be because the machine likes it, but probably still not there, okay? Good?
Can I ask a
Yep.
very quick question? Sorry for interrupting.
No, go.
When you're talking about the size of the market,
Mm-hmm.
nowadays if you go local, European, and worldwide, so you have like 3 stages, you can face a value like 500 billion, a trillion, 2 trillion, 3 trillion, you can go to that side. But the fact of saying my market is $1 trillion doesn't mean that I'm going to even try to get 0.00001%,
Yeah.
which it would be a lot of money, but still,
Yeah.
it's not that big. So what is better, narrow it down and say you go for 20% or make it huge? And say
I love when I skip slides to try to make it faster and someone asks like, yeah, what about those slides? Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's 2 ways of focusing on how to address the market size. One is what we call the bottom-up approach, and the other one is the top-down approach. I'm going to start with the top-down approach, which is what most people normally use. Most people will get some kind of report on like, the drone industry is going to be a $20 billion industry by 2020. And then you spit this to an investor and the investor goes like, and they laugh at you. Why? Because, yeah, that's fancy talk for, yeah, the analyst decided that that's going to be this big. The reality is completely different, and the reality is that the time scales that you manage are very different. So projecting your addressable market through like a $3 trillion market and then digging down to your niche market or to your addressable market and saying, okay, our market is, at least on the local scale is 100 million. It's okay, there's nothing wrong with it, but eventually you're going to end up with a pretty, I would say, overinflated number. No one is going to believe this number. The reason why people ask about the size of the market is to understand how your brain works. Okay, we don't want psychopaths on the stage. We don't want people that go like, so how are you going to address a $3 billion market? Oh no, it was just a cool number. I promise you, I've heard this before. I'm not inventing this answer. This answer has happened on the stage. Okay, and it's like, no, explain to me how you ended up with that number. No one that knows their stuff is going to believe the actual number. It's not about, figuring out the right number. There is no right number. No one can predict the right number. But what's important is for people to understand how you're thinking in terms of ambition and how you're thinking in terms of who your potential customers are and how many are there out there. Okay? Now, what most investors prefer is a bottom-up approach. The problem with a bottom-up approach is that not everyone can actually do that. Because a bottom-up approach requires you to already have data. So I'm already running an MVP, or I'm already running some tests or some trials or whatever. So I already have some real data from the market. Now what I do with that data is I extrapolate and I start going up. So like, okay, these are the profiles of our users are this. We can cluster them into 2 big groups of users or 2 big groups of customers. Now, how many of this cluster do we have in the country? This many, and then I keep projecting upwards. Again, no one is going to believe the number, but the point is, hey, I'm basing this on real data. I know who is using my stuff, so I know how many of them are there. Well, I know. I'm using national statistics, I'm using whatever, so I'm still using things very prone to error, but at least I'm basing it on a real grounding of my data. Now, normally when you go bottom up, you end up with a addressable market that tends to be smaller than the one you do when top down. That being said, there's some industries that are so new that there's literally no real data that you can use to project this. So the best way to do that sometimes is to use some kind of proxy market to project that. And say, okay, we get a market that's similar, and we say, okay, well, these people might probably be our customers, and more or less this is how it could be. There's no point in lying. It's not about lying. It's about, okay, trying to give the best explanation with the data that's available nowadays. Okay? Does that answer the question? Okay? So there's nothing wrong, but very few people will believe some of these approaches. If you have the data, use it to your advantage to say, okay, we already know this, and this is how many people there are, this is how much money there's to be made. Correlate the One of the things I see a lot when we talk about the market size is people correlate the wrong variables. So for example, going back to the gym example I gave you, I remember talking with the founder and said, okay, he said, well, there's this many gyms in Europe and this many gyms in the US. And I said, yes, but you're not selling your stuff to the gyms. You're selling the stuff to people that go to the gyms, which means that I don't care how many gyms are there. What I care is, no, actually, no, it was the other way around. He was giving me the number of people that went to the gym and said like, okay, that's great, but you're selling this to the gym. So what really matters is how many gyms are there, not how many people each gym has, which could be a proxy for something else. There could be a correlation with that variable, but that's not the major drive of your market. So be careful with that, because sometimes you guys, the way you project the market is based on a variable that's not the one that drives your growth. Okay? So identify what are your KPIs, what are those things that drive your growth, who are you selling to, and then use that to project the market. Don't use the market of your end user, which might not be the one that's actually buying this. Okay? Careful with those things. Good? Now, if we haven't talked about competitors before, as I said before, in terms of changing the flow, the normal flow is that after I talk to you about how big the market is, oh look, there's a lot of money to be made, what do you think people are going to ask? Okay, you're probably not alone, right? If there's that much money to be made, you're not the only one doing this. And then there's always a smart ass that will go like, no, it's only us. Bad answer, okay, very bad answer. It's like, no, if that's true, you're screwed, okay? Because that means that there's no money to be made. Now, careful when we're talking about competitors, what we're really asking for is who is out there. I don't care, we are combining direct and indirect competitors. I was talking with someone last week about this when we were going through their pitch. And when they reached the competitor part, they said like, well, right now our competitors are, what was it? It was pen and paper and a spreadsheet or something like that. And I said like this, sometimes you guys forget that your real competitor might be a human with a pencil. Seriously. So when we talk about competitors, another way of saying this is, how are people currently solving this problem? I don't care that the way they're solving is bad. Actually, well, I do care, because if it's an inefficient way of solving it, then you have space to improve it. But that's what I'm asking. And if they are using a pen and a paper to solve it, then say it. That is my competitor. My competitor is this guy with this big hand that uses a pencil to mark whatever. Okay, so keep that in mind. That's what we're looking for. It's like, okay, how are people solving this? Who is out there? Okay. Now, as I say, don't lie here. There is no point on hiding competitors, because eventually you're going to have someone in the room that knows them. And if you go and say, it's like, well, we don't have any competitors, and someone raises their hand and goes like, yeah, what about, you're dead on the water. They just kill you on stage, okay? So don't lie. I mean, what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to put 150 competitors out there, okay? But you need to be smart about this. So for me, for a 3-minute pitch, taking into account that you are not going to be able to narrate nearly absolutely anything because you go pretty fast around these things, if you include competition, I'll say that again, if you include competition, because some people don't require, it's not that they don't require, but on a 3-minute pitch, it might be more important to focus on something else because maybe the niche is not that well known and competitors are not that powerful. Okay, so you make a call and say, okay, for a 3-minute pitch, I'll kill this part because it's not as relevant as maybe other parts. But if you include competition, which in most cases you should, okay, what I said is more of a borderline case, but in most cases you should, the best way for me to show it is by showing it graphically. On a 3-minute pitch, you really need to play with the graphics because whatever you're not saying needs to be said graphically. That way you save time on your pitch. So I don't have to explain it. You already understand it by looking at the screen. Okay, so play with that. That's why I'm saying on this kind of pitches, the design and the way you show things on the screen matters, because it conveys also the extra information that you don't have the time to talk about. Okay? Now, for me, one of the best ways to see the strategic landscape, the competitive landscape, is by putting it on an axis. Now, you are the one that gets to choose what kind of variables or group of variables you're plotting on the axes. Now, for God's sake, be honest about this, okay? Don't say like, people that are called me, everyone else, okay? Use those kind of variables that are your competitive advantage, that are those that are improving the delivery of the solution with respect to the competition. Now, this kind of chart, give me a break, okay? This kind of chart, it's fake. In very rare occasions, you are here and everyone else is on the other side, okay? Oh, okay. No. This is not what the competitive landscape normally looks like. This is how the usual competitive landscape looks like. And there is no problem. There are no problems by showing this. That's why I'm saying be honest about this. There's no problem with showing this stuff. The problem comes after this slide. Okay? Because once I show this slide, what I'm telling you is like, look, yes, we are slightly ahead of others on whatever variable or KPI I'm using. But there are people around us. And we're honest, there are people that eventually can move aggressively within that space, which is the case for nearly everyone in this room. Now, the big question is not this. This is important to show because it shows that you know your space. Putting someone on the other extreme and not really assessing that that company might be closer to you than you think it is, it's a strategic mistake. One that can be very costly for a company, okay? So just put them. Now, how many do we put? Rule of thumb. Don't go too narrow and put every single competitor that you have that no one absolutely knows. Okay, no, there's two guys in a garage in Singapore that are building this, and I know them because I met them at a hackathon. Fuck off, okay? But don't go too broad either. Very recently, one of the startups I was working with last week, we were talking and they were putting on this chart, they were putting, with good reason in a way, they were putting telco providers as part of the competition. It was very smart because it is true that telco providers could move aggressively on into their space. But I said like, okay, be careful, don't go that broad. I mean, maybe mention one or two that you think are closer to achieving that than say every telco provider. That's probably too broad in terms of who the competition really is, okay? So my normal advice is there should be roughly around 5 to 6 balls in that chart, more or less, depending on your industry, okay? Sometimes in very specific industries, there's only 3, fine, okay? But in a normal industry, roughly around 6. Try to place the balls that come up more often. So if every time I pitch to someone, they go like, oh, so you're like Uber. Well, you know, the first answer is like, fuck off. No, we're not like Uber. But the next answer is, no, because blah, blah, blah. So if that comes up all the time, put Uber there. Be smart. Put Uber there. Even if you know that you're pretty far away from them. But it gives you a good cue to then talk about how different you are. So like, well, a lot of people tell us we're like Uber. Yes, Uber, there. Let me explain to you why we're not Uber, blah, 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 blah. Okay? But be honest. It cannot happen again that I've seen pitches where someone goes like, oh, but you're like Dropbox. And the founder goes berserk. And goes like, no, we're not like Dropbox. I say, dude, what's going on? It's like, everyone asks me if we're like Dropbox. Then you're an idiot. Because if they keep asking, why isn't it there? Okay? So careful with those things. Now this is the key of the question. If I'm putting this chart and there are competitors pretty close by, which is fine, here is where you need to convince me that they're going to stay far, okay? That you have whatever you're building allows you to build what's called a moat. Something that allows you to keep the distance between you and whoever is moving into your space. If you cannot convince me that you have a moat, you killed your pitch in the middle of the stage. Now, I know this is pretty obvious, but I'm going to repeat it. If you are in a very crowded space, in a very competitive space, your moat needs to be like 10 times more apparent than if you are in a space where there's not that many competitors. You know this phrase that goes something like, it's not enough to be Caesar's wife, you also need to look like Caesar's wife. Well, this is exactly the same. When you are in a very competitive space, it's not enough with saying, hey, we have better technology. You really need to convince me that whatever you have is 10 times more powerful than everyone else's. So if you're an electrical vehicle company and you come around and say like, yeah, we have a better navigation system than Tesla, you know what I'm going to say? Why? Because that's not enough. That's sadly not enough to counteract a massive company with the branding. Well, Elon is doing a great job at screwing the brand, but despite that, you know, they're too big for you to use that and be better than they are. Well, you might be better technologically speaking, but remember that this war is not just about technology, it's about appearances. It's about branding and it's about perception. So even if you have slightly better technology, it might not be enough to cut it because most people go like, yeah, but this is a bigger brand. Okay? So careful with this. Here is where you need to put the technical words, whatever you're using, whatever gives you a really powerful advantage here. Now, if you're in a non-competitive space, then with showing 2 or 3 things is more than enough. It's like, okay, we're doing this and we're the first mover advantage. We have this, we already have a community around us, blah, 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 blah. Case in point, very typical blockchain companies. We already have a community of, 20,000 people are using our cryptocurrency and our smart contracts and blah, 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 blah. Well, there's not that many people playing on that field. So, well, there is right now, but at one point there wasn't that many people. So you might be able to pull it off, okay? Be careful with those things. Beyond the usual, we have a secret algorithm. Beyond the usual, we have IP, so intellectual property. Beyond, we have a patent, which are the usual. Or we have first mover advantage, or we have, God, what's the name of this? Market lock-in, right? When you already build a community and then it's very hard for others to build, even if they have better products, because you own the community already, okay? Network effects, that's the exact word. Those are the usual kind of differentiation points that we normally use here. I'm going to show you 3 more, just in case, so you understand that there's other ways of also explaining this. So, in an essence, is how you're different from your twin, okay? I have twins, by the way, so this is a kind of question I do get a lot. First one and the most obvious one is, hey, we have a better feature than you have. So you have 2 features, we have 15 features. Feature wars are a byproduct of highly technical companies. The more engineering-driven companies, the more engineering-driven a company is, the more they get into a fight of we have more features than you have and we have 3 more and you have 2 less and blah, blah, blah. Is it a differentiation point? It is. Is it the best one? It's not. This normally, what this brings is a price war afterwards that drops the price of whatever service or product you're having, and that's not something you want. Another way of differentiating is by means of having a powerful backend. That means what we sometimes say, we have a secret sauce that we have our own algorithms, blah, blah, blah. What we're really talking about here is like, look, we have a massive amount of data that no one else has, that allows us to train our systems, or hopefully you go here marketeering terms and you go like, we have a deep learning system, machine learning system, AI, powerful, very, very powerful, like Trump would say, incredible, powerful, okay, that allows us, with our proprietary data, allows us to deliver a feature that no one else has or can replicate. Case in point, Amazon recommendations. Have you met any company that's capable of doing better book recommendation than Amazon? Beyond a human, obviously. I hate Amazon when it does that. It's like, oh, you will probably like this and this and this book. It's like, yeah, fuck off. Yes, I do. Shut up. I don't want to give you more money. Okay? But even though the feature is extremely simple on the outside, the back end, what goes under the iceberg, is extremely complex. Not only complex, but they have massive moat because they have data that no one else has. So no one can actually replicate that training because they don't have the data. I'm highlighting here an important point because you remember what I said at the beginning. I said a lot of you guys have a similar technological stack. A lot of you are using very similar systems, very similar algorithms. Now, when you're talking about intelligent algorithms here, one of the key points is if we all train the system with the same data, then we will all have the same behaviors. Now, those of us that have unique data that no one else has will be able to train the systems in different ways. And due to that, we can expose features that no one else can replicate. You see? So this is a way of differentiating. You have to be, obviously in a 3-minute pitch, it's very hard to go as deep as I'm going, okay, but just keep it in mind. Precisely because technology is becoming very commonplace for a lot of people, it's becoming increasingly important on how you differentiate on a design base. So front end, it's not that it didn't matter before, but it wasn't as prominent as it was before. It's acquiring an extreme weight when it comes to differentiating companies. And I'll give you a good example. Probably the most nerdy ones and the older ones. Who can tell me what IRC is? Anyone? Seriously? No one? You're making me feel very old right now.
It's the chat.
It's a chat.
The old internet chat.
The old internet chat. It was called Inter-Relay Chat. It was the precursor of Microsoft MSN Messenger, which then evolved, blah, blah, blah. Now, we add flower power to this. And you know what we got? What we get? Slack. Everyone here knows Slack? Most of you? Okay. Slack plus flower power minus flower power is IRC. The chat with channels, with modules that you can connect, add-ons that you could program and connect. It's the exact same thing. Now, IRC, only for nerds. Slack, multi-billion-dollar company. There's a lot of years in between, okay? But my point is, usability and design are becoming a hallmark that differentiates companies. Technologies that have been known for a while, with a very good UX and a very good design and a rethinking of it, can make a big difference in the market and acquire an incredible amount of customers that they couldn't before with the prior incarnation of the technology. Okay? So keep this in mind that sometimes, and it's becoming more and more important, usability and design are making the difference. Okay? I'll give you an example, and maybe it's more, it's closer for some of you. You have Google Now on one side, and you have Amazon Alexa on the other ones. One uses the Amazon Echo, the other one uses the, I don't know what's called, the Google Home. Google Home. Okay? Technologically speaking, quite similar. I would say probably Alexa is still slightly ahead of the curve, but quite similar. Now, the war is going to be decided based on this. Not on the technology, but on this. Okay, so keep this in mind. These are powerful moats. And those that understand it will allow their companies to succeed where someone else, with including better technology, might fail. Okay? Good? Finally, okay, we've talked about competitors, blah, blah, blah. And do you know what I was asking myself? Show me the money. I will repeat this ad infinitum. There are so many companies that fail at explaining this. If you don't explain how you make money, you are dead on the stage. Is that clear? If there's one thing that you cannot take out, is this one. Even if it just takes you 2 seconds to say, you need to say it. You need to tell the audience how you're making money, because it's very easy to say, oh yeah, we're going to solve this and blah, blah. Okay, very good. But how are you making money? Because it's very different to sell, for example, a biotechnology company directly to consumer or to a lab or to a hospital. Those three things are very different. And it might be the difference between succeeding and crashing the company. So apart from the fact that one I'm selling it at $100, the other one I'm selling it at 10,000, and the third one I'm selling it to 40,000. Okay, so the price range is also very different. So we need to understand what kind of revenue models are you putting in place. Okay, now keep it super simple. Please try to avoid crazy acronyms. Okay, try to avoid, oh, we're going to use a SaaS system. And let me show you how this is true. Who can tell me what SaaS stands for?
Software as a service.
Who didn't know that? Raise your hand. No, keep it up. Keep it up. No? Everyone knew it? You didn't know it. Someone else? You didn't know it. My point with this is that we think that everyone knows this when they don't. Now, if I tell you my revenue stream is a monthly subscription fee, does everyone understand that? Case in point with what I was talking with using acronyms. Careful. Oh, we're going to do a SaaS, the way we make money is a SaaS service. Fuck off. No one knows what that is. Well, they do. Actually, I recently heard something like, what was it? Something like CR SaaS, like crash. I'm like, what is that? Oh, you don't know what crash is? No. Oh, it's customer relationship software as a service. Like, seriously? Okay. So now people are going creative with the acronyms. Okay. If it's not bad enough that we're using acronyms, now we take creative licenses with the acronyms. Okay. So careful with these things. So keep it simple. You know, you bottle, me dollar, you bottle. Okay. Clear. Keep it as simple as possible. Now, if you're using more than one revenue model, try to focus on that one that makes most of the money. Okay, so if you have 3 or 4 ways of making money, try to focus on the most important one at the time. Then you can mention the other ones. Say like, on top of that, we intend on activating advertising and blah, 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 blah. Okay, but there's no need. First of all, you're not going to have the time to cover all. And no one cares. People want to focus on the one that's making you money right now. I'm saying this because sometimes you guys put like really complicated, I keep saying this, and I keep seeing really complicated business model slides with this massive diagram with 15 arrows going inside and outside and say like, well, if you're a corporate, this can go here and here, but on our B2C aspect, it can go here and here and here and here. You're like, seriously? Choose one. A 3-minute pitch is the art of simplification, which I know it hurts a lot because you're doing so many things that you want to put them all. You can't. So you need to decide what you want to put out there. What do you think is more important for people to understand? And ideally, you should have 1 or 2 concepts per slide. That's it. So if I want to play with 2 revenue streams, fine. 1 and 2. One B2B, white labeling. Another one a B2C. We also sell it directly to consumers through our website. Full stop. Don't go deeper than that. You're not going to have time to explain it. And even if you had, you're probably going to overcomplicate it. Good? Now, if the business model is clear, which sometimes it's not, but if the business model is clear, and you're telling me that you're going to sell your product or service for a $1 million fee a year, what do you think I'm going to ask you? Exactly. How do you intend on selling something for $1 million a year? Go-to marketing strategy. The more weird whatever you're building or doing is, the more important it is that you explain this. If the sales are pretty obvious how you're going to do it because it's very simple, or let me do this, if you're doing, for example, imagine that you were a smartphone maker. A smartphone maker, probably I don't need to go too much into detail on how we're going to market this because, you know, everyone knows where the phones are being sold. That being said, I'll give you an example where this is important. Everyone here knows, obviously, Apple, Samsung, Huawei. Everyone? Does everyone here know Xiaomi? Beyond the sports band, but as a phone maker. Yes? Some people. Well, Xiaomi is the 4th largest smartphone maker in the world. 4th. Repeat that. 4th. Catching up to Apple. Now, the reason why Xiaomi has been so successful is because they're selling in channels that neither Samsung or Huawei are doing, especially in India. So sometimes these things matter, and they matter a lot, even if you think you know it. Okay? So again, as we said before in the market, 2 endpoints here that you can touch. If you don't have any data, so we just started, we don't have any clients, we don't have any prototypes, so we don't have any data. Well, the best way to try to explain this is try to explain the strategy. What kind of strategy are you going to follow? Now, what about strategy? Strategy is not this. This is called brute forcing. Okay? Oh, we're going to do social media. What again? Oh, we're going to do viral videos. We're going to do influencing marketing. This is strategy. Okay? Precision about what, how you're going to do these things. Look, we're going to partner up with banks on their online part on their marketplaces to resell our service through them. That is precision, okay? Careful with this. Sometimes you guys go super big. It's like, oh yeah, we're going to sell this and, you know, someone will sell it somehow, okay? Or, well, I honestly, I've heard this one before. Oh no, but our product is so good that it's going to sell itself. You go like, it's going to do what itself? It doesn't, okay? If you have data, show it. If you have growth, if you have 200% growth month over month, show it. If you have a funnel of, you know, up to $2 million in projects, show it. If you're already running prototypes, show it. Okay? Now, nothing trumps an explanation like data. Oh yeah, we're deploying this strategy. Yeah, and well, we think it's kind of working. We acquired 10 million users last month. You know what? I don't care. Stop talking. I don't care what you're doing. Keep doing it. Okay? You know what I mean? Like, there's sometimes where metrics, the traction is so good that I don't want to hear anything else. You clearly are doing a great job. Okay? If you don't have data, you have a problem. Or if you have data that's not that compelling or convincing because it's very early on, try to focus on the trends. That's what people look for. I don't care about the volume that much. I do care about the trends. So if suddenly from now till 6 months, your trends are growing exponentially or starting to show hitting exponential growth, those are the kind of things that I'm interested on. Okay, those are the kind of metrics that you go like, okay, you might be doing it pretty well if this is happening. I'll give you a real case scenario, a real example. So I'm an investor at a company called Libros.com, so books.com. And what we do at Libros is we do crowdfunding for books. Well, we do a bunch of other things right now, but essentially we do crowdfunding for books, for authors. And when I met the founder, I remember that he said, well, you know, we don't know what to do with the project because we're doing software for publishing houses, and at the same time we're running the crowdfunding thing. And I said, well, but how is the crowdfunding thing going? It's like, well, you know, it's not going. We have 3 books only. So it's like, yeah, so I don't know. I'm thinking about shutting down part of the company, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, yeah, well, I mean, the last book raised 10,000 euros in 24 hours. I'm like, what again? Do you mind backtracking on that you just said? Like, yeah, we have a book that raised 10K in 24 hours. And I was like, and you are thinking about closing what exactly? And the guy's like, yeah, but that's tiny. I mean, we only have 3 projects. I'm like, yeah, 10K projects. Kind of pretty rad if you ask me, right? And it costs many years to get to the point where we are now. Right now, we're the 4th largest publishing house in Spain. But my point with this is sometimes even if you don't have volume, the trend is important. So when I saw that, it's like, look, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know if this was luck. But the fact that you raised that amount of money in 24 hours means that there's hunger for this and that there's a big opportunity to do this again. So let's go and do it. Okay? So play with these things. Whatever you're doing is like, okay, that might help you go to market faster. Keep doing it. Keep doing it. Yeah.
Not sure how to ask this question. We're in virtual reality, and we're always compared to the mobile market. So when you look at volumes, you're like Goliath, and you know us, David. So how do you go about in presenting data or small traction, if you get any, that's relevant? You know, in our market, I think there's like the leaders of AAA games hit 100,000 downloads in a year. You look at just mobile, you're in millions and billions. So how do you even show that, oh, we got 2,000 or we got 10,000? Is that, I mean,
as you just said?
Is it relevant to, well, do we have to explain that they may actually compare you to a mobile market, which 2,000 users is not very much when you have access to a lot of people?
Well, I would say, I'm going to answer you twice. First part is, if you have people that know slightly, that know a little bit about technology, you should be okay. It's like, look, VR industry is starting now. I have a whole article on VR at the Aleph where I said, like, look, this is disruptive technology, but it's not there yet. And they just released the Magic Leap, and they're just reading the comments. You can see how it's not there yet, as much as they like to hype it. So the thing is, if you're with someone that knows a little bit, they understand that you are not compared to a mobile game. That would be completely unrealistic, taking into account that who here owns a VR headset? Please raise your hand. 3 people, 4 people, wow. That's impressive. Wow, that's not the usual. But here we are outliers. We are into technology, and even us, there's only 4 people out of nearly 30 that has one. Okay? So my point is, if you know a little bit of this stuff, it would be unrealistic to say, oh, you know, you're going to have 20 mil. That's not going to happen. That's the question. That's an answer that you don't need to explain if you have some kind of a knowledgeable audience.
But we're talking to journalistic.
Yes, but in this case, and I'm putting the hat off the conference proper, you shouldn't have an issue with this. Now, that being said, if you want to take the extra mile and play it safe, then say exactly what you just said. It's like, look, we are a VR company. VR hasn't taken off yet. It is beginning. And the top people here are growing at a 3% rate. We just launched that and we're growing at a 150% rate. And even though our volume is not massive, you know, we hit the right pedals to accelerate our growth so far. You know, so you can either go and say, like, look, everyone kind of understands that. But again, the importance here is not the volume. It's the reasoning behind. So if I cannot believe your reasoning, I don't care about the volume. I mean, If you say, I have 100 mil users, then okay, whatever you're doing, it's clearly working. But I don't care that much about the volume, as long as whatever you're telling me about your strategy makes sense. So if, for example, you're telling me that in the next year or in the next 6 months, you're going to grow 3 million, you're going to add 3 million users, I'm going to call your bullshit. Because I'm going to tell you, the market is not there yet. There's no way you're going to add 3 million users in 6 months. It's just not going to happen. Not because of you, but because the intrinsic situation of the market. Okay? So that's what people are looking for, is how is your brain working? Does it make sense? It's like when someone goes around and throws this, oh yeah, we're going to open our China offices and we're going to capture 1% of the Chinese market. And this is a totally American guy, and you go like, from California, and you go like, no, you're not. Okay? You're clearly not. So my point is, there's certain comments about how you're going to achieve the scale or how you're going to reach the market that are just completely implausible. So what we're looking for is, okay, give me something that sounds plausible, either because you already have some kind of data that backs you up, or that is credible in a way. Okay? In your case, it's easy because if you're on VR, there's a lot of things that are non-credible there. Like, oh yeah, this is going to be the biggest game, and you know, people are going to start using this new. I know, because I always tend to go to the editorial side. So yeah, the news are going to be seen in 360 format. Okay, it's not going to work. Not now. It will work, but not now. So don't bullshit me and tell you that I have a partnership with the New York Times to get their content on VR. Fine, awesome, but that's not going to give you growth. Not because the New York Times is not a great company, but because they don't even themselves have that audience on the VR side. So it's the consequent. It's this consequent things that you say that matter. It's not that much about the numbers. It's about, okay, does it make sense what they're saying? Okay, good, clear. Last but not least, I want to know, after you've told me all this stuff, you've told me the pain point, you've told me what you're building or what you've built already, you've told me how big the opportunity is, who is out there, how you're different, how you're going to make money, and where, and how you're going to capture that. So with all that information, now the question is, okay, so if you're going to do VR, and you're going to get into the media space, you better have a couple of experts on VR, very good sales guys, and people in the media industry. Because if I don't see that, probably your team is not the best team to pull this off. Or I'm a fashion company, and I don't have absolutely anyone that has worked in fashion on my team. Or I'm doing a fintech company, and you go like, okay, so who has financial experience? Oh, no one. We've never touched a bank, not even with a stick. Okay, fine, it might be fine, but I hope you have at least an advisor that knows something about numbers. Okay, so the reason why we put the team is not for the sake of talking about the team and saying, oh, you know, this is a very nice person, he went to very nice schools and he won the prize for best debate player when he was 10. I couldn't care less, honestly. Or look, he won the 2015 World Frisbee Championship. Well, either you're a Frisbee company or I don't give a fuck about it, okay? Especially because you don't have the time. You don't have the time to dig deep into the bios of people. So what I want to see here is who is in your team and what are they bringing to the table. That's not always possible. Okay, sometimes your very young team is like, here at IE it's very usual. When I work with IE Venture Day teams, it's like, or Venture Lab Day, teams, it's like, oh, they just told us to, you know, get together and do a startup. Who has experience with that? No one. Have you ever worked? No. Okay. Okay. So this stuff happens, but in general, I'm pretty sure that you guys are doing whatever you're doing because you have had some kind of expertise. Okay. So that's the kind of stuff I want to see here. How does your expertise place in giving you better odds at succeeding? Okay. So for example, if you have people that have serial entrepreneurship experience, or they've taken a company, they've IPO'd a company, or they've sold their company, those are the kind of things that are valuable. Why? Because, hey, you know, they probably know a lot about growth, they know a lot about who to talk to, why to talk to. Or if you're in pharma and you don't have anyone that has worked in the pharma industry, you have a problem. You really have a problem because you don't know the regulation, how does the regulation process goes, how the certification things go, how long is it going to take on average. Okay, so those things are important. Now, I'll give an extra comment here. There's some cases where you put the team or part of the team at the beginning. But those are very rare cases. I say this because there's always someone that goes like, well, I talked with investors and they told me to talk about the team first. And I always say the same stuff. It's like, no, they didn't tell you that. They told you, talk about the problem and then tell me who is in the team. That's not putting it at the very beginning because people take this literally. And then you see a logo and then a team slide and you go like, what are you talking about? Like, yeah, very nice people. I don't care. Okay? Now, there are certain situations that grant putting the team at the beginning. Let me show you. So, good afternoon. My name is Mark Zuckerberg. This is my new company. There's a basket there. You can leave your checks and your money there. Thank you very much. Okay? There are exceptions. There are situations where you can pull that off. Why? Because you're very well known, because people have invested in your companies previously and they know that you're very successful. That stuff happens. But in general, it's not the case. So careful with this. Another variation of this is if you are in a very competitive space and you have a lot of expertise in that space. For example, the music industry. So you're going to pitch me some kind of musical app that has to do with licensing. You better tell me from the very onset of the pitch, look, I know this space because I've worked for 20 years with Emmy or Sony or whatever. If you don't say that, I'm not going to believe absolutely anything that you talk about that. But be careful with this because this is not talking about the team at the beginning. It's making a small intro about the team at the beginning, which is a slight difference. Okay? So it's just, I'm just precluding what the team is made out of. And I just give you a hint of like, look, the head of the team is this person, and that's the reason why we're in this space, because we have massive knowledge about this, or contacts, or expertise, or whatever. Okay? Good? Try to put nice team pictures. Try to avoid shitty pictures like this, where you have your PhD chief scientist officer with a really shitty black tie. Well, no, mine is nice, okay? But, I mean, like, white background, guy with a shirt and a black tie that looks like from the 80s and something like that, you know? Nice. This is unconscious feeling, but sometimes it's good to see an image of the whole team together and see, look, they are a team. Because there's way too many startups where they go like, yeah, it's me and then my CTO that has 3 other companies. Okay, you go like, yeah, well, that's not a team. That's someone that's freelancing for you. Okay, so careful with those things. Try to give the most cohesive view of your team that you can. That doesn't mean that you have to go deep into talking about every single person you have in the team, but just very, very big overview of the team. But this is another example where an image conveys way more information than whatever you can explain in this time. Okay, so instead of explaining, oh, and we have an expert on this and that, I can give you an image of my team. I can give you the, for example, if you're in biotech, I can give you the logos of, you know, Johns Hopkins University, blah, 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 Harvard Medical School, blah, 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 blah. I don't even need to talk about this stuff. Okay, or, you know, Nature published papers, Science published papers, blah, blah, blah. I don't need to even talk about it. I just show it, show the cohesive company, say like, where our team is made of experts with 20 years in the field, with published papers and a very well-known trajectory in their fields. That's it. I'm just saying this, again, reminding you guys that you have 3 minutes, so I cannot go any deeper than that. So use the graphical aspect to offload part of that comprehension of the team, okay? Last but not least, milestones and projections. So If I buy all the stuff you just told me, I want to know exactly where are you? What have you achieved so far? Do you have a prototype? Do you have prior investment? Do you already have customers? What have you achieved so far? And then the next step is, okay, so what are your plans for the next 6 months, for the next 8 months? This part is normally a way of explaining how ambitious are you around your startup. So if you tell me like, yeah, well, the next 10 months are going to be developing the technologies, like, you probably are too early. Now, if you tell me that, well, the next few months, we're already opening a new office in Paris, another one in London, another one in blah, 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 and we intend on the next, in 4 months to open our first office in the US, for example. It shows a certain degree of, okay, they have a plan and they're trying to make it big. The worst thing that you can put on this situation is the feeling that your company is very local. I say this in general because especially Southern European teams, and we're called the South Summit, so we tend to bring a lot of Southern European teams, tend to undersell themselves, okay? You put a US company, it's like, oh yeah, in 5 months we're gonna, you know, everyone's gonna use our stuff, and you go like, yeah, sure, whatever. And then you put a Spanish team and they go like, yeah, in 8 months we will move from the city center to the outskirts. In 1 more year, we will go national, and we will go to Barcelona. And if luck comes and we raise a Series A round, we will go international and go to Andorra and Portugal. And you go like, what? Okay, so neither too small or too wild, but you do need to sound and show that you're slightly aggressive because you're a startup, and that's what people invest in. Okay? So that's what you need to show out there. Normally, when you don't have anything, you put this kind of milestones. We got accepted to South Summit. We're one of the 100 finalists of South Summit. Good. I'm not saying that's bad. But if you're selling stuff, that's much better than saying you're a finalist at South Summit, okay? My point with this is that sometimes when you don't have any important milestones, especially business milestones, here we're talking about business milestones. When you don't have them, you tend to flag this around, oh, we went through Techstars Accelerator, we went through Wire Accelerator, we blah, blah, blah. That's irrelevant from a business perspective. I know this is hard, but it is irrelevant. For an investor, it is irrelevant. The only thing that this tells me is that you have a certain level, that you've made the cut, and that you're not fully bullshitting people. But that's it. It doesn't say anything else about your business. Okay, so just be aware of these things, okay? If you have business milestones, that's the kind of stuff that people are looking for, okay? And last but not least, you need to close your presentation with a call to action, with an ask. What are you asking for? Not everyone comes to the summit asking for the same things. We might be asking for partners. We might be asking for customers or investment or a corporate we can deploy our stuff in. Whatever it is, now is the moment to say it, okay? And before you finish, try to not close your pitch with, and we're asking for a 2 million Series A round, and that's it. Thank you. Bad closing. I know you've heard this before. I'll repeat it again. The only 2 parts of a pitch that people remember are the beginning and the end. What's in between tends to be forgotten. Okay? So keep in mind that whatever powerful story you use at the entry point, at the beginning to highlight the problem, the best thing you can do is close the presentation in a 360 fashion. So bring back the pain. Here's what I tell you. Now, next time you have a pain and you need to go to the emergency room, please remember and ask yourself, is this doctor rested, or am I going to be subjected to someone that's prone to kill me? Help us fix this. We are blah, blah, blah. You see the difference between saying this and saying, oh, I'm done. Okay? So close it. Bring back the pain. Bring back the power. If you're using a powerful story, the best way to do this here is to bring back the story. Say like, oh, and one more thing. You remember what I told you about the emergency room? That actually happened to my kid. And he nearly died. Thankfully, the doctor had slept. And he saved his life. So yeah, bring back the story, deliver a final chapter on the story that reminds you of the situation. Okay? Good? Sure? It was like, is he going to say something else? I have a lot more, but we don't have the time, okay? But so far, clear? Again, you don't have time to cover all the questions that we've gone through, okay? So you are going to need to choose on which ones you spend more time and on which ones you kind of skip around because you can. The decision is yours, but keep in mind how the audience works. What kind of questions are the usual questions that you get? Those are the ones that you cannot take away because they will come up. Okay? Now, the best case scenario that you can have is that you do the 3-minute pitch and then there's a question of, wow, that was impressive. Can you tell me a little bit more on how it works? That is a great question to have. That is that you did a great job. Obviously, you don't have the time to go through all the stuff that we do, how we do it, you don't. Doing a 3-minute pitch is an exercise on simplicity, and every word and every image counts. So if I can say something with one word instead of with a phrase, those are 2 seconds that I'm shaving from the final time that I can use to say something else. My advice in terms time-wise, constraint-wise, is write down what you're going to say on every slide. The point is not to memorize it at all, but for you to visually see what are you delivering on each slide. So if you just put the script with slide 1, let me get there. Say slide 1, blah, 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 blah. Slide 2, blah. Slide 3, blah, blah. Slide 4, blah, 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 blah. And you just put it at a distance. You don't even need to read it. And you see this and you go like, the slide deck is unbalanced. Because here I talk too much over the same slide, which means that this either I simplify it and I keep the slide, or I break it down into 2 simplified slides. Okay? Don't be afraid of adding more slides. It doesn't matter. It shouldn't increase the time. It only increases the time if you keep talking a lot over the slide. But if you do an exercise of breaking it down into, hey, each slide is 1 line or 2 lines tops. That's what I'm going to say on that slide. When you simplify this way, then you can see if whatever I'm saying here is being repeated here. So if whatever I'm saying I'm saying it here with different words, then I can kill these 2 lines. I just won 5 seconds. Okay? So it's not about learning it by heart. You will say it in a different way when you do it on stage, but the point is to try to balance how much you're saying on each slide and to see if you can, simplify some of the things you're explaining. And when you see it visually in front of you, it's easier to play with that than trying to figure it out. Okay? Good? Well, I hope this serves you beyond South Summit. The point of this workshop is not just for South Summit, it's for you to actually take back something that's valuable for you on the long run for your company. Okay? One of the things we do at South Summit, and we keep telling people, is like, winning is the least thing you can do here. The whole part of being involved at the conference, meeting new people, getting this kind of trainings are what really delivers value for you guys. This is not a conference about, hey, we're going to put fancy speakers on stage. That's not the point of why we do it. The point is, hey, close as many meetings as you can. You have Bea there who's in charge with Maria about closing your one-on-one meetings. Don't leave it until the very end, because a lot of you guys do that. Like, oh, until 2 days before the conference. Well, they also fuck it up sometimes, okay? So if they're not giving you the books of the investors and the speakers that are going to come and that stuff, you give them shit, okay? Because they should give it to you as soon as possible. I know I'm putting you in a bad spot, but no, hey, we have to be honest. But my point is, even if you don't get that, try to set up your own meetings as fast as possible, because that's where you guys get the most value. It's not about being on stage. It's not about winning. It's about connecting. It's about knowing new people that can open you doors. And that's why I think, honestly, this is valuable. Good? Well, guys, it's been an absolute pleasure sharing this afternoon with you. I hope it's helpful, and see you all at South Summit.
Thank you.
Yup.
Do you have some suggestions for graphic